Thank you, everyone. We're moving into a session, the first session after what has been such riveting and amazing conversations and presentations for the morning, grounding us first with Dr. Duke Redbird, and then going to Thomas DeFranz in his multiplicities of Blackness and Black presentation and form, from history and context to the living reels that you just saw, addressing this idea of anti-Black racism in the arts. The session we're about to do is looking at Black cultural spaces, building cultural spaces reflective of the African, Caribbean, Canadian diaspora. I'm pleased to introduce the moderator, and the moderator will be Mark Campbell. Mark is a creative and a scholar. His research explores the relationship between Afrosonic innovations and notions of the human. His bio will be placed in the chat. I'd like to invite Mark, who will be also talking to Cheryl Chase, Aita Sadu, and Josh Dwyer on the board of BAND. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you for having me, Sapamo. Thank you, Kevin, for inviting me to participate in this, what has already been this morning, quite an intense and fruitful set of discussions and debates, and some really great questions. So I would like to begin by really introducing myself a little bit more and talking a little bit about what is building cultural spaces that reflect African and Caribbean Canadian diasporas. And I was fortunate enough to be part of a process of beginning to build one of these spaces, and that process is still on board. But when I think about cultural spaces, I think about how Black life continuously exceeds the categories, not just of the human, but a lot of the categories developed and inherited from colonialism. And one of the things that makes me think about how we exceed a lot of these confines is the way in which the yard and the streets and places outside of buildings and institutions have come to operate as an essential space of where culture and expression thrive, where they develop, where musical formations emerge. I'm thinking in the case of samba and toreros and being in spaces that are sometimes inside of a building, but very much outside of the status quo and the main discursive formations of a society. So in my thinking, when I'm in my thinking, I like to think of cultural spaces as something that's not necessarily confined to the museum or confined to the art center or to a building or a physical space, but also thinking about how do we take up space publicly, how do we take up space creatively, and how do we transform those things that we take up, right? We think about something like capoeira that comes out of Brazil. This is a martial art and a dance form that needs no space. It needs no physical space. It needs sand. It needs dirt. It needs to be outside. So I like to think of those as ways to scaffold and think on top of how we imagine cultural spaces in the diaspora. Now, we have some wonderful, wonderful folks on board, and Kevin has already introduced them. And before I ask them to jump on board, I'd like them to weigh in. I will add some more thoughts here to thinking about what do we need to do to create spaces that reflect the diversity of Black diasporic life and racialized life, right? And one of those things that I like to think about as essential is thinking beyond the confines and the constraints of our present moment. So divesting and diverging from some of these mainstream and very divisive ways in which generations occupy different spaces. I think about the single unit home, the single family home, which is one way that structurally you get builders and construction teams think of maximizing profit by making sure that grandparents, can't comfortably live in the house or with younger generations. That's a very structural kind of way, but also just thinking about what kind of space do we want to design that is not necessarily endorsed by mainstream cultural thinking or mainstream sociological thinking, and what might that involve physically and in terms of ideas, what would that involve? And for me, I've been lucky enough to be in the middle of the production of cultural space, Black spaces, specifically attending a conference with Erna Brodber and Clinton Hutton in Jamaica many years ago. And what became clear to me is that to make a space a welcoming space, a space where people of color and racialized people and Black persons can feel welcome and can creatively exist, is to think about what are some of the practices that we carry with us and we've carried with us even prior to the Middle Passage. And I think about how call and response has been critical to how music has unfolded, how participatory ways of vernacular and conversation exists. So being participatory, being one of these ideas and practices that we can build into spaces, even if they're existing museum spaces. Thinking about improvisation, thinking about expressive language and movement and the ways that we can make these traits and attributes of Afro-diasporic life embedded into how we inhabit these spaces. Now I want to turn to our three panelists here, and I'd love for them to weigh in and share with us your journey in building cultural spaces, building Black cultural spaces, because we have Josh and Aita and Cheryl on board. And before I continue to answer all of the themes and questions in this panel, I would invite you to jump on board and turn on your cameras and participate with me and I will ask you, each of you, to really talk about how you've thought about and built spaces, cultural spaces, and what were some of the practices and the kind of awareness level or consciousness that you needed in order to develop the spaces that you developed.
And Mark, and good morning, everyone here at the conference. And it truly was a wonderful segue in the morning, and was particularly taken with Elder Dr. Duke's remarks. Creating cultural spaces. I think one of the first things that I learned or identified is not to say no, to be open to any idea. And as you were speaking, it reminded me of when Lana Turner came the first time when we were across the street at 746, and she said, can I show a movie and have a movie night? And how many people do you expect? Oh, of course, people always say hundreds, and of course we could hold 5 people, but in your capacity and your thinking of a people, we could hold 500. Yes, we said to her. Can I do it in the backyard? Yes, I said to her, and she went away. And then I panicked. Oh my God, what time of day will it be? How are we going to darken the backyard where she's going to shoot this thing? It ended up being a magical moment where she featured the ROM 11 and the protests around the ROM, shot it on the wall, full backyard. From that moment on, then we had creds to say, oh my God, we have a drive-in backyard. You could come and show your film and do programming. So again, the ability to be open, because artistic people will come with their imaginations and show you how something could be done. I am totally in agreement with you that a cultural space is not just a physical space. It's a space. Every time that I'm thinking of a cultural space, for some reason, I always go to the spirit of Charles Roach and Dudley Laws. 2 people on a given day will get up and think, I have an idea. I'm going to phone 25 people. If 2 show up, I'm going to execute it. But also too, in their spirit is a spirit always of movement, And so whenever I think of those people, it makes me think of parades. It makes me think of the train ride. It makes me think of how can we animate Bathurst Street? Another simple thing, we put a bench in outside of Bathurst subway in honor of Lenny and Gwen Johnston. And sometimes it is just wonderful to have a parade from the center to the bench, to say something affirming, to end something special, to begin a moment. So again, the engagement of artists and just being open up to whatever the idea is. In the time that we've moved to 777 across the street, if people came in and told me I can chew gum, be left-handed, and walk in water, and I want to do that as an installation, I will say yes, because I don't know what that possibility is, but what I know that here is an incredible imaginative idea. But here's also the thing. This may be the only space that will give you the opportunity to demonstrate this potential in this moment, and don't see it as madness or not see it as art or any of those things. So that is very important with me or with us at the center when we think of programming, to be as open and as imaginative as possible. And if there is movement, when we moved in the building of the cultural center, where is the space of the public? Again, I saw in Graham's eyes, a filmmaker, the idea to move people across, to move us from the bookstore across the street, to make that a cultural engagement. When people come into our spaces, oftentimes there's an expectation, there's a perception that good service or customer treatment isn't given. I don't subscribe to that, and I don't know that. I know that when people come into to our center, they're greeted with warmth. When I go to other centers, I'm greeted with warmth. These are some of those cultural things. People love up on you when you come through the door. And then again, when we opened up the space, how do we record people's engagement? So we said to them, bring your ribbons, bring your scissors. You're going to record your names. Everybody get to cut the ribbon. Why should 3 important people or seemingly important people get to cut a ribbon? And now we're going to record your names on banners so that people know you were the people, all 83 of you. Okay, Jada wrote her name twice because she's 8. All of you came to the opening of this thing. Again, the engagement. So at every turn of the way, how, and when people moved you, you look to see what they did. Where did they put the boxes? Where did they think that the bookshelf should have gone? Where did they see where the space is? When we brought the carpets in, 5 women came up that day, boom, boom, boom. They determined the carpets that we had in the space. That is the engagement at every turn of the way, so that people then add their DNA into the mix. So now people come to take a picture of what they have done or where their name is or some act that they have brought into the space, if it's even the silver candy thing from back in the day, and they also brought the cleanser to clean this, the silver tone to clean this thing. So the engagement of cultural spaces and the building of them to reflect us in our diversity is all along the way. What are the moments of access that we allow the public and trust the public and their imagination to take us to another level? Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Last thing I want to say, Coco Murray's on this call, and Coco Murray came to the first train ride. And Coco came, she was in the 3rd wave of people to come. And she was coming from a dance performance, and there were drummers. And that energy, after the nurses who came before them and the elderly people who came from Oakville, they came into the space. They brought that energy. The drummers started to play. The transit became a performance space. And then everybody else who came became an actor and animated the stuff. So I saw her name, but that just triggered a memory too of how people just come into a space and recreate it. So if we are thinking Eurocentric buildings, we will have to plan every single detail. But if we are thinking of spaces where people will engage, then that is minimal because they now have the capacity to add their stamp into history.
Wow, thank you, Aita. I will come back to you with additional questions. I want to let Josh jump in here and really talk about how you conceive of and think about building cultural spaces, Josh.
I mean, first off, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that I'm really sort of like proud and honored to sort of get to carry the legacy or the torch per se for an organization like BAND. But I did not start it, and so I don't have that experience, those stories that ITA clearly has. I know BAND was started 10 years ago by 4 women: Karen Carter, Karen Tyrell, Julie Crooks, and Maxine Bailey. Also, just that shouldn't be surprising. It is often the Black women who are really the mobilizers in this space and have really sort of created the foundation for many of these Black culture spaces that we have today. And so I just want to sort of pay my respect to the folks who started BAND and were at the moment, I think, in a bit of a new chapter, and there's some a new generation that has sort of been invited to sort of carry on the legacy of this organization. One thing I think is important to sort of note is, you mentioned, how do we create these spaces that are reflective of the diversity of sort of the Black experience, which I think is a really important thing. I'm sure we'll get into sort of the funding and everything like that of Black spaces, but I think there is a tendency to think of Black culture as like a monolith, and that there isn't necessarily room for multiple Black spaces. There's room all over the place. We should have Black spaces for in every town, in every city. And so I think often funders at a provincial government level, they're like, oh, we funded this one thing, so you guys are good, right? Like,
They loud. They loud.
Yeah, but so I think that's really important. There's a diversity of experiences within Black culture, and there should be room to sort of platform all of those experiences. And then I think for an organization like BAND, one of the roles that we've really tried to play, I think, and one of the things that was really noticed early on is for Black artists, it was just so difficult to find, especially for emerging Black artists. So, to be an artist, you need at some point to get, somebody needs to take a chance on you to give you a space to exhibit. And solo exhibitions especially are something that I think Black artists have really found it hard to come by. And I think BAND has sort of filled this gap in terms of, taking a chance on young or emerging Black artists and giving them a space and platforming them and centering their work. And so that's really the role that we've played, and I hope we get to continue to play that role in Toronto and beyond.
So Josh, you kind of really touched a little bit already on the challenges. And I wanted to actually just jump in at that moment and think about, the challenges of staying relevant and being connected to the new diasporic communities that come in, and thinking about when we're at the table with funders to push back on them and say, from an abundance perspective, yeah, we have one art center, but why can't we have 4? And why don't we have a cultural center and a theater and an art center and really suggest to folks that, our programming, at some times of the year it's very Nigerian based, and other times of the year it's very Ethiopian based, and pushing back on those pieces. Because I feel like people feel that, especially when you're checking boxes as a funder, you're like, oh, well, I mean, you guys are you got one already, so yeah, you're good. Like, everything's fine. We've done our job. We let you in the door and it looks like everything's equitable. So, those are the places where we have to push back. But maybe after Cheryl jumps in, I'm going to come back to both of you too around this question of other additional challenges in operating. So I'll let that marinate with you while we let Cheryl Case jump in.
Maybe I can give you a short introduction of myself. So I'm an urban planner, and through urban planning, I see a lot of conversations regarding, land use, and Ita, she's had a very important, specific example of what happens sometimes in the planning process when Black spaces are not given their due respect, but then also how you can advocate to, to have your respect and to maintain your place, as a different book list is an incredibly important cultural space for the Black community. as you know, the Black Bathurst and Bloor has been for the Black community. So one of the areas where I've been focusing in on is the Eglinton Avenue West neighborhood in Toronto. So that's, if you think about it, Eglinton and Allen, Eglinton and Oakwood. It's one of these fabled spaces that, you know, is really important to the Black community. At one point, you know, I'm told that it had more reggae record stores and outside of Kingston, Jamaica itself, right? Which is just such an amazing thing to imagine. And also one of the first Black business people in Canada was in Eglinton Avenue West. It was in 1913, there was a trucking business founded by Nathan and Goldie Redman, two Black Canadians. And so there's a lot of important history there. And so the NIA Center of the Arts centered their location in this neighborhood as, you know, fortifying that space's respect as a Black hub. And it provides a number of amazing programs. I hope there is time for NIA to share all that with you later on today. And that space itself is also of importance to the Black community. It's been a dance space for the Black community. But, you know, picking up on what you're saying there, Mark, about there's less than about having these one-off spaces. We need to have a multitude of spaces that are safe for the Black community. So, for example, in the Eglinton Avenue West area, just, you know, focusing there a little bit more, we have NIA Center of the Arts, but we also have, you know, we have the library space, which has its own little archive of Black history. There's discussions about having a business museum in the area to talk about Black businesses that have existed in Toronto, and to activate those spaces as spaces for arts and culture conversations. And so yeah, so very much agreement with all that you're saying, Mark, and the importance of having spaces where we feel comfortable to be ourselves, right? Like in Eglinton, we were even able to have public, can you folks hear me?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, yes, because you're frozen for me. So we were even in Eglinton at one point able to turn the public space outside into a bit of a movement art space for us to express our cultural heritage as as Caribbean Black people. You know, having kiddie carnival and other types of carnival where you would have actually tens of thousands of people coming onto Eglinton. And the fact that we've been displaced from that public space is of great concern, right? So it's about, you know, public space in terms of the outdoors, but also private spaces that are safe for us to be Black selves. And so that's one of the roles that I push for in the planning industry, is enabling for these, or removing those barriers that make it difficult for us to take up that space.
Thank you, Cheryl. And I will add that when we were choosing the NIA Center site, we were very cognizant of the histories of Black music in that building. And the previous owners, you know, when you do the homework, it was one of these places where reggae and hip hop concerts and parties were a regular thing, you know, when it was Black owned, that particular building. But I also say this because historically, if we think about the UNIA building, which ends up becoming Timeless bar and studio, it's very hard for us to have an idea of what happened, you know, 100 years ago in this city and what Black space looked like then. And I think part of the work that of us coming together like this, and, you know, luckily we have someone like Aita who could probably tell us a little bit about what was going on College Street with the UNIA building. There's so much for us to build on and being conscientious of building on, you know. And while I want to, you know, remind people that we have this really rich legacy, you know, maybe going back to before the UNIA building around building Black spaces, I think now that I have all three of you on board, I'd love to hear about some of and I think our audience would like to hear a little bit about some of the challenges of operating and caring for Black space. I have some that I would love to throw in, and I'd love to, you know, maybe we can go down the line if some of you want to share about some of those, not necessarily negative things, but sometimes challenges, you know, in the operation of. Who would like to jump in?
I'll go ahead. So again, going on more about Eglinton West. So that was the site of Kitty Carnival and other types of carnivals there. And so I think the barrier that we face in the community is the fact that we're excluded essentially from operating some of these financial structures that end up funding these spaces. And so they don't give priority to the things that we value. And so the Kitty Carnival, for example, was taken from the Eglinton Avenue West neighborhood. It was brought to Jane and Finch, and then somehow it ended up in a Hill in Scarborough, and very far from the actual base of where the Black community is located. And the carnival was so important because it would provide business to the local businesses and support for them to thrive, and that's important because the stronger we are economically, then we can reinvest in our communities. And so the issue here is that not only was it taken, but the actual business improvement areas, the local governance around the Eglinton Avenue West area is known to be a proficient practicer of anti-Black racism. Like, I've heard stories about Black businesses and Black people being excluded from conversations, made to feel unsafe to participate in conversations. And so, when the community wants to bring back, the Caribbean themed street festival, there's resistance to it, right? Instead of having it be about the Black community, it's about international communities, communities of all backgrounds. But no, the Black community wanted something about the Black community, just as, you have Greek festival or Greek Town festival. We wanted a specifically Black celebration. And so I think that's one of the major barriers, is the people that we're having to interface with to get these tasks done. Sometimes they don't have the understanding that they need in order to support us in doing the work that needs to be done and to maintain and produce these events and these spaces.
I think one of the, if you don't mind me jumping in, one of the things you've touched upon, Cheryl, which is frustrating outside of just trying to run in a Black cultural space, but is just the onus on Black folks to always have to prove our worth and our value. You know what I mean? Like the fact that Black Lives Matter is something that needed to be convincing. I don't find our challenges in the arts and culture world much different. We're always having to prove why it's necessary for us to have a space, for our cultures to be celebrated, for our history to be acknowledged. And it's, I think that therein lies the uphill battle of trying to sort of like, you're starting at ground zero every time you're trying to have a discussion about, why we should get funding or why we should get a permit or any of these things. It's this huge gap in terms of, where we are as a community and where some of the gatekeepers that we need to go through to operate as a space or as a community and where their understanding lies.
Very true. Aita?
Good points from both Cheryl and Josh. And Josh, I think they've even moved it up one now. So yes, we know that you're important. And yes, all of these things because Black Lives Matter. But do you have competency in your community to execute it? Like, how are you going to deliver that? Where is the competency? Because, artistic people can't really manage things. But do you have like other professional people, or did they die? But who will manage this? And do you know this is a very complicated process? This will take like years to do. Do you have that time to do that? And you sit there and you think, if a human being created it, then a human being can deconstruct it in 30 seconds. So what are you asking? So the ask now is, do you have expertise in your community to deliver on these areas that you have been excluded out of? And now we're going to give you access to those areas. Do you have the expertise? And sometimes you want to say to them, a lot of the people that I know who have never reached that potential and have spiraled down, we know 1 million people right now who can execute any of the things that we want to deliver on. So we got to push back on that. And in every meeting that we go to, and they say, you know, there's another one of you, or are you the same thing? You say, no, but I hope that you support and fund that other thing, because we are supportive of that too, right? That really too is on us to keep saying that over and over again, that we have to have multiple spaces, not just parks that are named after dead men. In the social services, you can find funding and funds to pay people, to pay staff. Somewhere in the arts and cultural area, maybe it comes from philanthropy and how this structure was set up. It's implicit in this is that the cultural and the arts will generate revenue. So you have this burden now of having to pay staff and artistic people, not to do a project, but to move the organization forward. This is not consultants coming in for 2 months and doing something. This is not a training and a workshop. This is like core funding stuff. So our avenues are TAC, OAC, and Canada Council and these people like that. But there is where our limitations are. Attracting and having funding and policies that speak to the payment of people and staff, right? All our festivals, you're struggling. Oh yeah, we can give you money for this, that, and whatever, the computer, the whatever. But here's the thing, somebody's got to operate that. Somebody's got to be trained on that. And if you can give us that capacity money in human capital, we can move forward. My next little mantra that you know that I'm on, the tax receipt, the charitable tax receipt. People, we got to have a movement on this. Again, you're penalized in the arts and culture around this receipt. But here is the box that we are jacked into. You have people who want to give you money, but there's no number that you can give them. So you go back to government for the money that those people would have given you. Because here now you're jacked up with the CRA and all of that policy and recommendations. The government runs the CRA. So I believe that there is a conversation to be had with the government around the CRA and how we can have access to charitable receipts. You already monitor us. We are the most people of accountability ever in this world, right? Because we are stealing millions of dollars, or we are giving our friends the hookup with affordable housing. So we have all these checks and balances. So here is the thing. We need to petition the government, the federal government, to move the needle for us with that charitable receipt access. It really paralyzes us as institutions in order for us to attract money from philanthropists. Hence, we go right back to the government again. So my 3 things. Funding has got to change somewhere where we can pay people. There's got to be something about that. We need to address this receipt issue. And this is just not us as Black people, right? And whatever we do, and whatever will change for us will impact everybody else. Everybody else is going to benefit with whatever change is made for us.
That's absolutely true. In design theory, they say design for the edges. We are the edges. And, you know, when we made sidewalks more inclusive in the 80s, we had a little ramp going down sidewalks for people in wheelchairs. All of us kids on our bikes loved those little ramps. Everybody benefited. And nobody suffered when we designed for the edges. And I think that's one of the points where we're at is that when we talk about Black Lives Matter, we're actually pointing out one of the failures of European humanity, right? Or the quote unquote idea of European humanity, the failure that we can look different and act differently, but we still belong to the same family. So I don't want to rant, but I do want to also ask the panelists to talk about managing the space. And I'm thinking more about the people coming into the space. And Aita, you've talked about hailing people. If you go into Aita's bookstore and she's there, there's no way she's not going to hail you up at the door, even if she don't know your first name. I'm sure Aita forgot my name. Many times I come in, she hailed me up from the time I come in the door. So can we talk about the operating space and what's the vibe? What are some of the practices and the feelings that we have to consider in trying to create this kind of space that we want?
I cut my teeth on customer service because I lived upstairs Raps. So I know Eglinton, Mr. Spence, Miss Monica's, and it was fascinating to watch them and people come into their space and how that operated. And so you make note. But you also think of the market ladies and the people who operate market spaces. These are the people who inform you of the service that you give. When we come through a door in any space, there's so many things that we come through the door with. Is somebody going to follow me around? If my debit card don't work at the point of sale, is this going to end my day and I'm going to be really embarrassed? You know, are those people talking about me? Oh my God, you just came through the door. You're paranoid already. All these considerations we have. I'm feeling down. I'm a nobody. So I came here today. So it is really important that everybody who comes through that door, you welcome them. Even if you are having the worst day, you welcome them. If they have bought books from you and they come back to tell you what is in the books and to school you and teach you, you be in their class. You have no position to push back on them, but you be in their class. In every step along the way, you make people feel welcome. You ask them, I learned this in America. When I would go to visit book people in America, we would stand for an hour and a half and have a meeting. And I remember noting that and thinking that anytime somebody comes into the space, you're going to take a load off of them, invite them to sit down, even if it's for 5 minutes. And it doesn't matter how busy you are. If you acknowledge another human being is there, oh my God, that is bigness for the day. Never ask people when they come into your space, why can I help you? No. People will say no because help is seen as a sign of weakness. If you ask them that, then you have a one-way conversation. But if you ask people, what brought you to the place today? Then your conversation is endless. You know that they came because it was raining, so that is honest. But then their eye might catch something like Jay Douglas on the wall, so they want to go to know who he is, or Molly Johnson or somebody. So it is really important from the time that they come in. And if you say that an event is going to start on time, make that event start on time as possible as you can make it. So if it is at 7 o'clock and you've got only one person there, but you're still waiting for your cast of 1,000, you say to that one person, it is 7 o'clock. I respect your comment. Give me another 5 minutes and I'm going to hook you up. And if those people don't show up, you're going to execute that same event as you were going to execute it for the 500,000 people that just didn't make it because lives just got in the way.
True. Josh, did you want to weigh in?
Yeah, I was just, reflecting on many things that Aita was sharing and thinking about, even for myself, my first experience when I can remember the first time I went to band, and think about the experience that we try to offer folks who come through our doors. And really, I think of, I'm sure everybody here is familiar with code switching, and it's a place where you can let all that guard down and be yourself, speak how you speak with your family and friends. There's times I've brought white friends of mine into the band space, and they'll be like, "Oh, I've never heard you speak Pato before." It's like, well, because now I'm home, I'm in my space, I just think that is the sort of, it's important. I feel like it's important in two ways. One, I think the community needs places, needs public spaces for that, but also it is I think it's like a authentic and genuine way to share our culture with others when other folks come through the door. And so I think that's sort of that's the important role that we play and the experience that is sort of offered at an organization like BAND.
Thank you, Josh. Cheryl, did you want to jump in on this one too?
I think Ida and Josh provided really great feedback to that question. So I'm not sure if there's much I could add there.
Okay.
The only one little tidbit on that, Mark, is when people come, they must see the memory of where they are. And while I want to show them ancient civilizations, what I want to show them the legacy and the richness of the Caribbean, I also want to show them where they're located. And maybe it is not them, but it's somebody that they know that is on the wall. So that affirms that experience because they see that they too can be there. Little subtleties like that.
I absolutely agree. And one of these things that I can tell you, I have lots and lots of Eglinton West stories as a kid in Scarborough where I had nothing to do. I had no money, but I wanted to stand out there and look into the barbershop. I wanted to smell what was cooking. I wanted to hear people talking, even though I had nothing to buy and nothing to do. But, you know, we would get on the bus and be in a space where we felt like there was safety in being who we were. And there was nobody, you know, if you walked into a store, you know, as being a teenager, when you walk into a store in Eglinton West, they are not looking over your shoulder to see if you're stealing something, or they're not staring at you the whole time. You walk in and you feel comfortable. So I wanted to, you know, in the last couple minutes we have together, I wanted to segue to sort of ask each of you maybe to weigh in on this idea of helping all of the funders that are on the call and people that will watch this in the future. How do we help people understand exactly what is so critical about a Black cultural space? And I want to be as elaborate as possible for folks. So let's imagine our audience are people that are, you know, that are following all of the rules, and they're looking at all the numbers, and they talk about what is, you know, what is operating funding and what is not operating funding, and what can you include in this budget line and what can you not include in this budget line, and move outside of those constraints of the good bureaucratic administrator, and help folks think about what is really at stake in having one of the populations, one of the founding populations of Western society, asking, demanding, and living through the kinds of spaces that diverge quite dramatically from Western institutions, like the library, like at least the way the library is formed today, like the museum. I'm thinking particularly like the White Cubed Gallery. How would you guys think and elaborately sort of try to impress upon people what exactly is at stake in the creation of a Black space in Toronto in 2020, in multiple neighborhoods, in Brampton, in Scarborough, in Eglinton West, in Etobicoke, etc.? I know this is an elaborate question, so I'm making my question super long so that you can have lots of time to marinate on this. And Cheryl's ready to jump in.
Yeah, I'm just make sure I go before Ita, because I know Ita will blow it up. So
wise. You are a performer.
So I think what's at stake is I would just say that, you know, the arts and culture is so important to our democracy, right? So the Black population, for example, is less likely to vote than other populations, you know, in part because of the wealth gap, but also because of the way that we see or do not see ourselves involved in the public discourse and the, you know, the governance of our cities. And so when you're able to enter into a space that reflects you, that cares about you, that loves you, that type of space, it doesn't come very often for the Black community. A lot of these spaces are actually, for example, the art gallery, the Ontario Art Gallery of Ontario, they have huge rooms about that depict in different kinds of ways the colonization of Canada, but then without really paying attention to the fact that this is actually a harm that was done to the Indigenous people, right? And so as Black people, you know, we have a bit of a relationship with, you know, as our nations have been colonized and we have been taken from our home nations and you know, turned into slaves and all that kind of stuff, and now having to deal with the after effects of all those systems. When we're able to enter into a Black space, we feel at peace. We feel again like that these people really care about us, and so it's easy to be our authentic selves. Like, you know, Josh was saying about speaking your patois and really having that pride in yourself, and that translates into your experience into so many other spaces in your life, and will help you to accelerate in other spaces in your life. That's what I felt, at least when I've entered into the different book lists, when I entered into NIA, when I've seen these events hosted in these spaces, it makes me feel actually very strong and very confident to go then into other spaces and to know that these are, you know, these assemblies of my communities that are able to express themselves and able to celebrate amongst themselves. So that's what I would say. Like, that's why the importance of these spaces is that it actually has a multiplying effect towards benefiting society in so many different types of sectors, including our governance and the health of our cities.
I'm also going to try to jump in before Aita, because I allow her to be the keynote as she deserves.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess so. Outside of my role at Band, I also help run a museum here in the city, and already on this call, I've heard some names brought up that are really important to me, like Dudley Laws, Charles Roach. Organizations like the UNIA, Cheryl mentioned, the Redmond family up in Eglinton, and these are names that I never hear outside of conversations within our Black spaces, but they deserve to be a part of the larger historical narrative of the city. And so right now we're barely carrying these stories along. We're barely allowing them to be shared with the next generation. But these people deserve so much more than that. They are sort of the pioneers of so many pieces of this city. They are the reason the city is the way it is today. And so it's just like, I feel like that's what's at stake. And then also thinking of something like West Eglinton, that place, we are on the precipice of like losing that entire the strip and the histories, the stories that it holds, and that these legacies, these important histories, they cannot be. It can't just be on like the community on their spare time and money out of their own pocket to carry them along. And that's not the expectation that's there for other cultural communities in the city. We proudly fund and celebrate a whole heap of other mostly European cultures. And so why is it with a place like Little Jamaica, we can barely hold on to its story? And I think that's like that's for me, that's what's really at stake here, is like our history is at risk of being lost and forgotten.
Wow, very, very true, Josh. Thank you. Aita.
And I want to go before Aita, but I don't know, for some reason, I'm sitting here thinking of the movie A Time to Kill. And at the end of the movie, while the man gets off, I think Samuel Jackson is in that movie. The question that was posed to the jury, and the juror who went for not guilty. Question was asked, if this was you as a parent in this position, what would you do? And every parent on that jury, and this woman thought, if my daughter was raped and this man was accused and there was no evidence and blah, 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 I'd let him go. Or if he responded the way he did, if his daughter was raped, how would I respond as a parent? I probably would do exactly the same thing. So she went with that vote. So what would I say to funders? Oh my God. I would say to funders, you have benefited from the wealth of your ancestors. And a lot of that wealth was at our expense. And you feel guilty about it. And whenever we have conversations with you, you are in conflict with yourself. So here's a thing that can make you have better nights to sleep. If I say to you, if your culture was lost, stolen, strayed, erased, and removed, how would you feel? You're not gonna feel good about that. And if somebody came, and if you went to somebody to say, give me help, would you expect that person to give you support and assistance? Okay, so here's the thing. We are not going to explain ourselves anymore to you about how great we are, about all the things that we have done. This is not the moment now. This is the moment for you to do the right thing. This is the moment for you to do the thing that you expect of your family. We have the same expectations because we are both paying taxes. You see, we are contributing into the economy. We have a festival that generates 400 million, and you're yet to do right by that festival. So I'm here sitting in this chair thinking that a festival that generates 400 million over a weekend, you haven't done right by that in 52 years. And I'm here now thinking that I've just now come to sit in this chair, you're going to do right by me. So in my ask to you too, I want you to also open the door for that big festival. Because when that festival is fixed, a whole lot of other stuff can fix, because I'm not generating 400 million. But I see you penalizing 400 million. So we are a little confused. If you want to make your legacy and you want to be promoted by us in the eyes of our community, because nobody knows you, but we are promoting you now to be a somebody, to be a champion, then you do the right thing. York University says, this is the time. Everybody's got this thing. This is the time. Well, here's the thing. This is Black people's time, and this is the moment. You know, everybody knows. There's nothing we can tell any funder they have not heard already. Every chair at City Hall knows the imprint of our bums. There's nothing more to say. What we need to say now are two other things. All the progressive bureaucrats that we know who worked in funding and understand that system, we want them to work with you to show you how you can create not new boxes, but the criteria to allow us to access the support that we need so that we are not back in the same place talking to you about the same thing again. And if you need help with the creation of those boxes, it is not us coming to some sounding and you make some little notes and you go away and reinterpret what we thought we said. Because all the time we have told you what we have said. But when we see the criteria, it's not what we have said. So you need a group of people out of our community, and this is my language now, who are progressive bureaucrats who have worked in your system and understand the way it is done, to work with you and with us to fix the language over here. But if you are 30 somebody or 40 somebody or 50 somebody, as a funder sitting in that chair, I'm not going to waste your time today, and neither you're going to waste my time. I'm not going to oppress you, and you're not going to re-oppress me. I'm simply here to say, pick up your pen, and for office use only, use stamp of approval. There is the competence. There is all of that going on out there. There is no need for all of this other talking, because you have so many streams of accountability that we have to check off. So I don't know. If we can get that money and do all that stuff, well, I want to be part of we.
You see, when you're running the 4x1 relay, you make sure that the anchor has the baton when it's time to come through the gate. You know, that's how it goes. I won't give any more sports metaphors. I always, I can't run that fast anymore. So I'm showing my age. But I will say, though, what I'm hearing from you all, and what I want to throw on the table, because I see it being embodied in the work that we're doing, and I want to give it name, and I want to give it name in 2020, is thinking about how we already live a sense of radical care, and what is it that we could, through Black cultural spaces, through Blackhurst, even if it's a temporary exhibition, through Nia Center for the Arts, through BAN, through Ita's bookstore, a different book list. How do we, not just with the bureaucrats, but how do we teach and show a sense of radical care that suggests to other folks that there's a different kind of humanity, that we live, and we must live in these spaces when we're allowed to be loud, when we're allowed to use patois, when we're allowed to dance? How do we demonstrate that to design a different kind of space so that when we come into the room, people understand that the acts that we're engaged in, these are not performative gestures of entertainment for television. This is not for the consumption of suburban white teenagers. This is about how we live and survive inside the jaws of the afterlife of slavery and a continuing kind of neocolonialism. So what would radical care look like? Or how do you express it, or how do you live it, Cheryl?
Yes. Yeah. So it's a bit of background on myself. So, I would say that, I'm an artist. I like to create things. I enjoy the arts and culture community for the spirit of it and all that. As an urban planner, I'm very much policy focused. Like, how can policy be shaped and to serve the needs of our communities? And so to me, the way that I've been able to marry these two is that whenever I do programming that is about culture, it's about implanting the seeds that will allow sustainability, right? So, and so, maybe even thinking a little bit about a Caravana. Caravana was also itself born out of a rebellion, like in a celebration of the end of slavery, of the end of our control from white people, right? And so to see it now become, held by those communities is quite ironic. And so for me, in the work that I do, I always try to put in place people who have the professional competency to prepare work that, inspires people, brings masses of people together to support that kind of policy change, and to bring attention to the need for that policy change to be implemented, but also for the experience to be one that is uplifting and fun. So, for example, I did a project recently that I'm writing the report for at the moment, called Black Futures on Eglinton. And so for Black Futures on Eglinton, we're talking about the displacement of the Black community from Eglinton Avenue West, and imagining a future in which, we are able to stay in place and to enjoy vibrant culture, 20, 30 years into the future. And so part of that event programming is I had Reggae Night at Mia Center, where we had reggae artists from, Jay Douglas was a performer. We had also younger artists performing, and then we had a panel conversation where folks talked about their experience of the arts, and then compared to, them being displaced or not being supported by policy, and then trying to find ways to, again, get towards those, I guess, as Ada described, these progressive bureaucrats, right? Because there are a lot of people who are on the inside who maybe don't have the tools or support to advance these policy interests. And so that's why, again, bringing these conversations to the masses, sometimes through arts-based conversation, but then also providing that educational opportunity for them to understand, like, this is how you can make a demand from your politician or from your organization to address some of these barriers that are being put in front of the Black community. So that's what radical care looks like to me. It's about being very thoughtful in terms of programming, and then always thinking in an expansive type of way. Like, how can I bring more people into this conversation to move us along to where we need to be, and to empower those who are already doing the work?
Thank you, Cheryl. Josh, did you want to express the levels of the radical care that you embody and exist both in both of your relationships to museum and the art world?
I mean, I think in terms of like how these all the Black culture spaces that are on this call operate, I think they already extend that kind of radical care to their own communities. And I think Cheryl was speaking more of how do we receive that same kind of radical care from others. I don't have much to add, except for one thing that I just already brought up that I just really wanted to second as a challenge, which is it is easy for Black. I shouldn't say easy, but the easiest piece of funding for Black culture organizations to get is programming. You can get a piece of money for programming. The second easiest piece is maybe you needed a little something for a renovation or for a capital campaign. But nobody wants to pay for operations. Nobody wants to pay for us to hire Black folks to work at our organizations. And I just really want to second that, because that is the crucial piece. There's no use for these materials like the new MacBook or the building, and there's nobody to put on the programming if we can't pay for folks to do the work. Like, you want to pay for an artist, but we still need somebody to do all the coordination for, to bring these artists on board. It's just the day-to-day operations, I think, are the piece that has really been overlooked, and there needs to be more access to funds for that.
Absolutely agreed, Josh. I will say that, it's interesting in terms of the metrics of success, something I always have a problem with when it comes to Eurocentric culture and the funding world, is that the folks that get these huge pots of operating money are the folks that have been able to scale their companies and their businesses. How do you scale a company and a business? Well, you hire people, right? And sometimes smaller and emerging organizations can hire people from donations in their community, donations from inheritance, and other kinds of structural ways in which the accrual of wealth has been intergenerationally passed down, for hundreds of years on this side of the world. And those things, they find ways they find ways into organizations so that on the balance sheets, you have some companies and organizations that they're not turning a profit, but there is foundation money from somewhere that somehow jumps onto those books when it comes time for them to be assessed, right? And when it comes time for the paperwork to be done. So they may be running an operation that's not making money, but on paper, foundation money from some sort of privately held endowment or fund is making this organization look like how they've scaled is a sustainable scaled venture. I'll leave that on the table for a lot of the policy folks who I've looked at hundreds and hundreds of budgets and annual reports from Ontario-based arts organizations, and I can tell you that there's a lot of there's histories there, right? There's histories there that when you start to look at the scale of something and something that maybe doesn't have the same kind of cultural purchase in 2020 that it might have had in 1920, they're still finding ways to reap the largest chunks of operating funding based on scale and size, et cetera. Aita, I'm going to let you take us home on this one because in my mind, you're one of the embodiments of radical care, but I'll give you the last word.
I'm struggling with about radical care, but I think, and again, I echo Cheryl and Josh. I think we also have to promote models where profit and nonprofit come together. Mm-hmm. Nonprofits cannot all be together and be sustainable. And this is a challenge and an opportunity in the arts and cultural world, but for Black people. And so we are at a wonderful time where we can take forward models like that. If we are all nonprofit together in a time of COVID, we will collapse. But if you have a revenue stream that is coming from the profit-for-profit world, and here's the thing, if the government is also saying we are investing in the building of Black businesses to nurture the development of that sector, over here, you cannot tell us that we cannot have this type of model or activity. What are we saying? So what we have seen in the world, in all the studies that the government has put out, that has been a case that is made, that we have to have a mixture of the two. So that would be my thing about radical care. And you know what, for me, the most important thing in building cultural spaces is really not the government and not all of these other things. The most important thing for me is, can I call band? Can I call NIA? Am I in collaboration with the carnival? I'm in collaboration with everybody in our community who is desirous to do something. That's a big piece. That's a big piece. We are all going on our journeys. We might be on different branches in the trees, but we're still on that tree. So it is important that when the wind comes through that tree, that we can hear the birds whistling in all of our branches, passing the message to the next one. Oh my God, I just thought that off the top of my head. How cool is that, right? But anyway, but in a fun way, this has been an incredible experience for me. And I'm very happy that I'm not leaving feeling I am reoppressed, because I'm not saying the same thing again, but I'm leaving thinking that there is fruitful things that will come out of our time today together.
Thank you, Aita, and thank you, Josh and Cheryl. This is